Clara sat at the small wooden table near the window of the cafe, her fingers nervously playing with a silver spoon beside her cup. The warm smell of roasted coffee beans filled the air, and the soft sound of music played in the background. People around her laughed, chatted, and smiled, but Clara's heart was beating too fast to enjoy any of it. Tonight was important to her. Tonight was the night she would finally meet her blind date. She had spent the whole morning preparing. She stood in front of the mirror again and again, adjusting her dress, fixing her hair, and trying on different shoes. She had chosen a soft blue dress that hugged her round figure in a way she thought looked gentle and kind. She applied light makeup, not too much, just enough to make her eyes shine. She wanted to look her best, even though a small voice inside her kept whispering, "It won't matter. He will only see your size." Clara had been overweight for most of her life. At school, children laughed at her. They called her names she still hated to remember. As an adult, things did not change much. Strangers judged her silently, some even openly, as if her body gave them the right to be cruel. Friends told her, "You just need to lose weight and everything will get better." But she knew it was not so simple. Her body carried her story, her pain, and her battles that no one else could understand. Yet despite all of this, Clara still carried hope. She dreamed of love, of someone who would hold her hand and see her heart before her body, someone who would look at her with eyes full of kindness, not judgment. That was why she had agreed to this blind date. Her best friend had arranged it, saying, "He's a good man. He doesn't care about appearances. Just give it a try." So here she was, waiting. She checked her phone for the 10th time in 5 minutes. The message from her date said he would arrive at 7 p.m. It was already 7:10. Her heart pounded louder. What if he didn't come? What if he saw her and turned around? Clara took a deep breath and tried to calm herself. She told herself, no, this time it will be different. Maybe he will see me, really see me. She touched the pendant around her neck, a small silver heart that her mother had given her years ago. Her mother always told her, "You are beautiful because you are kind. Never forget that." Those words were the only armor Clara had against the world's cruel opinions. The cafe door opened, and Clara's heart jumped. A tall man in a dark suit walked in, his eyes scanning the room. He was handsome, with sharp features and a confident step. Clara's stomach flipped. This had to be him. She straightened in her chair, smoothed her dress, and gave her most hopeful smile. For a moment, she imagined how the evening could go. They would laugh, talk about their favorite books or movies, maybe discover things they had in common. Maybe, just maybe, he would not notice her body first, but her voice, her smile, her kindness. As his eyes met hers, Clara felt her breath catch. She whispered inside her heart, "Please let this be real. Please let him see me for who I am." The man began walking toward her table, and every second felt like an eternity. Clara's hands trembled slightly, but she pressed them together to hide her nerves. This was it. The moment she had been waiting for. A new chapter could begin tonight. She had been rejected so many times before, but hope still lived inside her. That hope carried her now, as she prepared to greet him with the gentlest smile she could manage. For Clara, this night was not just about meeting someone. It was about proving to herself that she was still worthy of love. Clara's smile grew as the man in the dark suit approached her table. For a moment, her heart filled with hope. She imagined this night being the beginning of something beautiful, but as he drew closer, she noticed something change in his expression. His eyes, which at first looked curious, now carried a flicker of disappointment. He stopped at her table, forcing a smile that looked more like a polite mask than real warmth. Clara greeted him softly. "Hi, I'm Clara." "Yes," he replied shortly, pulling out the chair and sitting down. His voice was clipped, as if he was already impatient. Clara felt a small sting in her chest, but she told herself to stay calm. Maybe he was just nervous like she was. They sat in silence for a moment. Clara tried to start the conversation, asking about his day, his work, and the weather. But his answers were short, cold, and distracted. He barely looked at her. Instead, his eyes drifted around the cafe as though he wished to be anywhere else. Clara's fingers tapped lightly on her cup. She forced a gentle laugh to break the tension, but the man did not return it. Finally, he leaned forward, lowering his voice but not his sharpness. "I think there's been a mistake," he said. Clara froze. Her heart dropped like a heavy stone. "What do you mean?" she whispered, though she already sensed the answer. He sighed, clearly uncomfortable but determined to speak his mind. "You're not what I expected. You're too fat for me." The words cut deeper than a knife. Clara's breath caught and her chest tightened. Her face grew hot and she could feel her cheeks burning with shame. She had heard cruel comments before, on the street, in school, even from relatives, but hearing it here, on a night she had allowed herself to hope, was unbearable. Her eyes blurred with tears, but she fought to keep them from falling. She forced herself to sit still, to stay composed even as her heart crumbled inside. Around her, the cafe felt suddenly louder. The clinking of cups, the laughter from other tables, all seemed to mock her silence. The man pushed back his chair and stood. He didn't even finish his drink. "Sorry," he said flatly, as if rejecting her was nothing more than a business decision. Without waiting for her reply, he turned and walked away, leaving Clara alone. For a long moment, Clara stared at the empty chair across from her. Her hands shook as she tried to lift her cup, but she couldn't. Her throat ached. She wanted to scream, to ask why people couldn't just see her heart, her kindness, her worth, but no sound came. She lowered her head, staring at the table as the tears she had been holding back finally escaped. They rolled down her cheeks, landing on the napkin in front of her. She quickly wiped them, ashamed that others might see her cry. The whispers around her grew sharper. She imagined the other guests judging her, thinking, "Of course he left. Look at her. Who would want someone like that?" Her chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. She hated herself for hoping, for believing even for a moment that love might be possible. Clara wanted to run, to leave the cafe and never come back. But her body felt too heavy, not only from her size but from the crushing weight of rejection. She sat frozen, wishing she could disappear. Her mind screamed at her, "Why did you come? Why did you think you were enough?" Clara closed her eyes, pressing her trembling hands together, trying to gather the pieces of her broken heart. But all she felt was emptiness. In that painful silence, she believed she had been foolish to ever think she deserved more. Clara sat frozen at the table long after the man left. The empty chair across from her seemed louder than all the noise in the cafe. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table, trying to hold herself together. She had been rejected before, but tonight's rejection hurt in a different way. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he had said them, so sharp, so careless, as if her feelings were nothing. Her chest ached with every breath. She kept her eyes down, staring at the small spoon beside her untouched coffee. The drink had grown cold, but she couldn't bring herself to lift the cup. If she moved even a little, she feared the tears burning her eyes would spill faster. The cafe was still alive with chatter and laughter. Groups of friends talked cheerfully, couples leaned close, and families enjoyed warm meals. But Clara felt like she was in another world, an island of loneliness in the middle of their joy. She wondered if anyone noticed the pain on her face. She wondered if they pitied her, or worse, if they judged her too. A thought cut through her like glass. Maybe he is right. Maybe I am too much, too heavy, too ugly, too unworthy. The cruel voice in her mind grew louder with each second. She remembered the words people had thrown at her throughout her life. The laughter of classmates when she couldn't run fast in gym class. The whispers of coworkers when she ate lunch at her desk. Even family members who told her she would never find love unless she changed herself. All of it returned now, pressing against her heart. She lowered her head into her hands, trying to hide her face from the world. A single tear slipped down her cheek, followed by another. She quickly wiped them away, but they kept coming, betraying her. She hated crying in public. To her, tears felt like weakness. But tonight she could not stop them. The rejection had not only hurt, it had reminded her of every wound she carried, every time she had been made to feel small. She thought about leaving, but her legs felt heavy, as though the shame itself had chained her to the chair. If she stood up now, she feared every pair of eyes in the cafe would follow her, judging her all over again. Minutes passed, but for Clara it felt like hours. The air grew heavier around her. She folded her hands tightly in her lap, as if squeezing them could hold her broken pieces together. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "Why am I never enough? Why can't someone just see me? Just once?" Her voice cracked and fresh tears rolled down. She quickly covered her mouth, afraid that her sobs might escape too loudly. She wanted to vanish, to be invisible, to erase herself from this painful moment. But as she sat there drowning in silence, something inside her fought back. A small part of her heart still longed to be heard, to be loved, even though she felt shattered. She still dreamed of someone who could see her for who she truly was. That fragile hope, though faint, kept her from completely collapsing. Still, the pain tonight was raw. Clara had opened her heart and it had been crushed. She had dressed up, smiled, hoped, and in return she was left with nothing but shame. She thought bitterly, maybe love is not for me. Maybe I should stop trying. She didn't know how long she sat there, wiping her tears, staring at the cold coffee, trying to disappear into the noise around her. But at that table, in that moment, Clara felt more alone than she had ever felt in her life. Clara sat in silence, trapped inside her own sadness. The cafe around her was still buzzing with life, but for her every sound felt distant. She thought no one noticed her pain. She thought her tears were invisible. But at the table just a few feet away, someone had been watching. Michael Johnson, a man in his late 30s, sat quietly with a cup of black coffee and a notebook open in front of him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with skin as dark as polished ebony and eyes that carried both strength and kindness. His suit was perfectly tailored, the kind worn only by men who belonged to the world of power and leadership. Most people in the cafe didn't recognize him, but Michael was a well-known CEO, a man who had built a successful company from nothing. Michael had seen Clara's date walk in. He had noticed the way the man's smile faded when he looked at her. He had watched the short, cold conversation, and he had felt his stomach turn when the man stood up and left so harshly. And now, as Clara sat with her face lowered, trying to hide her tears, Michael felt anger rise inside him, not at her, but at the cruelty she had just endured. For a moment, he hesitated. He was not the type of man who usually involved himself in strangers' personal lives. But something about Clara's broken expression touched him deeply. It reminded him of his own battles, the times when people had judged him by his skin, his youth, or his background, long before they ever listened to his words. He knew the pain of being reduced to one thing, of being seen as less. Finally, he leaned slightly toward her table and spoke in a voice that was gentle but firm. "Excuse me," he said softly. Clara lifted her head, startled. Her eyes were red, her cheeks damp from tears. She quickly wiped her face, embarrassed that anyone had noticed. For a second, she thought he might be another person ready to judge her. But when her eyes met his, she saw no cruelty there. His gaze was steady, warm, and full of sincerity. "I couldn't help but overhear," Michael continued, choosing his words carefully. "And I want you to know, that man who left, he was blind." Clara blinked, confused. "Blind?" She repeated, her voice shaky. "Yes," Michael said, nodding. "Blind to what was sitting right in front of him. Blind to your worth. Blind to the treasure that you are." Clara's lips parted, but no words came. For a moment, she simply stared at him, unsure whether to believe what she was hearing. People rarely defended her. More often, they stayed silent or added to her shame. Yet this stranger, this man who looked like he belonged to a world far above hers, had chosen to speak with kindness. Michael gave a small smile, the kind that carried no pity, only respect. "Don't let one person's ignorance make you question yourself. His rejection says more about him than it ever could about you." Clara's chest tightened again, but this time it was not from pain. It was from something else, something softer, like the first light after a storm. She whispered, Why would you say that to me?" Michael leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful. "Because I know how it feels. People have looked at me and seen only my skin or my background or what they think I cannot do. They made up their minds before I even spoke. And it hurts. It hurts in a way words can hardly explain. But I learned that their judgment doesn't define me, and it doesn't define you either." Clara's tears fell again, but these were different. They were tears of relief, of being seen. For the first time that night, she did not feel completely invisible. Michael raised his cup of coffee in a small gesture. "To me," he said gently, "you are not too much. You are enough. More than enough." Clara pressed her hands together, overwhelmed by his words. For the first time in a very long while, her heart felt a spark of hope. Clara sat still, her heart beating fast as Michael's words echoed in her ears. She had never expected a stranger to defend her, much less a man who carried himself with such quiet power. His eyes were kind and his voice carried no pity, only truth. It felt strange, almost unreal, to be spoken to with such respect. For a long moment, Clara didn't know how to respond. She stared at her cold coffee, then back at him. "You don't even know me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Michael smiled gently. I don't need to know you to see that you didn't deserve what just happened. Pain like that leaves a mark. I saw it in your eyes. And I also see strength there, even if you don't. Clara lowered her gaze, embarrassed. She wasn't used to being told she was strong. Most of her life, people had only pointed out her weight, as if that was the only thing that defined her. But something in Michael's tone made her believe, even if only a little, that he meant what he said. Michael glanced at the empty chair across from her. "May I sit with you?" he asked politely. Clara hesitated, unsure if she should say yes. But her heart told her this moment was different. Slowly she nodded. "Yes, please." He moved over to her table, placing his coffee cup down in front of him. For a moment they sat in silence. Clara felt nervous, but it was not the same nervousness she had felt earlier with her date. This was different. Michael's presence was steady, calming, like a safe place she hadn't known she needed. He leaned forward slightly. "Do you want to talk about it?" Clara shook her head at first. "It's the same story as always," she said softly. "I try, I hope, I give my heart, and I end up being told I'm not good enough, not pretty enough, not thin enough." Her voice cracked on the last words and she quickly wiped her tears. "It hurts. Every time it hurts more." Michael's expression grew serious, his eyes steady on hers. "Clara, listen to me. The problem is not you. The problem is the way people are taught to measure worth. They look at the outside and they forget the soul inside. That man tonight, he didn't see you. He only saw what his shallow mind allowed him to see. That's his weakness, not yours." Clara blinked, her tears flowing again, but this time they carried a different weight. "No one's ever said that to me," she whispered. Michael nodded. "That's because too many people are afraid to look deeper. But I'll tell you something from my own life. When I started my company, no one believed in me. They looked at my skin and thought I didn't belong in boardrooms. They looked at my age and thought I was too young, too inexperienced. Some even told me straight to my face, 'You will never succeed.'" He paused, his jaw tightening at the memory. "But I proved them wrong. Not because I fit their picture of success, but because I refused to let their judgment define me." Clara listened closely, her heart aching with both pain and hope. "But how did you keep going?" she asked. Michael's voice softened. "Because I realized something important. People's opinions change like the wind. One day they call you worthless, the next they call you genius. But your value cannot come from them. It has to come from here." He touched his chest. "From knowing who you are." Clara swallowed hard, his words reaching places in her heart she had tried to hide for years. She had always searched for acceptance from others, but never thought of finding it within herself. Michael gave her a reassuring smile. "You are not defined by the cruel words of one man. You are not defined by a number on a scale. You are defined by your kindness, your courage, and your dreams. And if someone cannot see that, then they don't deserve a place at your table." For the first time that night, Clara let out a small laugh through her tears. It was weak, but it was real. "You make it sound so simple," she said. Michael shook his head gently. "It isn't simple. It's hard. But it's worth it. Because once you see your own worth, no one else's rejection can break you." Clara looked at him, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. His words didn't erase the pain, but they planted something new inside her. A seed of hope. A reminder that maybe, just maybe, she was more than enough. The cafe lights glowed softly, casting a golden warmth over the tables. Outside, the night had grown darker, but inside, Clara felt a faint brightness returning to her heart. Michael sat across from her now, his steady presence filling the empty space where pain had been only moments before. At first, Clara struggled to meet his eyes. She had grown used to hiding herself, afraid of judgment, but Michael's gaze was different. It didn't cut her down. It didn't weigh her body. It was gentle, calm, and patient. He asked her about her life, not in a way that felt forced, but as though he truly cared. Slowly, Clara began to speak. She told him about her childhood, about how books had been her escape from the cruel laughter of classmates. She told him how she loved to draw but rarely showed anyone her sketches, fearing they would only find flaws. She confessed how hard it was to carry hope when every rejection reminded her of her weight. Michael listened without interrupting. His hands rested calmly on the table and his eyes never drifted away from hers. He gave her something she had rarely been given in her life: undivided attention. When she finished, her voice low and hesitant, Michael leaned back and smiled. "You know, Clara, you speak with so much heart. That's rare. Most people only speak to impress, but you speak to share. That is beautiful. Clara's lips trembled into a shy smile. No one's ever called me that before. Then they weren't listening properly, Michael replied. For the first time that evening, Clara let out a small laugh. It was awkward at first, but soon it grew into something real, something light. Michael chuckled softly with her, and the sound between them was like a fragile bridge being built. Their conversation flowed easily after that. Michael told her stories from his own life, about the struggles of being doubted in every room he entered, about the mistakes he made while building his business, and the lessons he learned along the way. He told her how people judged him by his appearance before they even heard his ideas, and how he had to fight to be taken seriously. I know how heavy judgment feels, he said, his voice low, but I also know that once you accept yourself, the weight becomes lighter. The world doesn't change, but you do, and that makes all the difference. Clara nodded slowly, his words soaking into her heart. She realized she was smiling again, not because she was forcing it, but because she felt safe. She felt understood. The hours passed, but neither of them noticed. The cafe grew quieter as customers left, but Clara and Michael remained, lost in their conversation. Clara found herself sharing dreams she had hidden even from herself. She told him about wanting to travel, to see the ocean at sunrise, to one day open a small art studio. She spoke with excitement, her hands moving as she described the colors and shapes she loved to draw. Michael's eyes lit up as he listened. That sounds amazing. You should do it, Clara. Don't let fear stop you. The world deserves to see what you create. Her heart swelled at his encouragement. No one had ever told her she could. Most only told her what she couldn't. For the first time in years, she believed maybe her dreams were not foolish. As they laughed again, something shifted inside her. She realized she was no longer thinking about the man who had rejected her. His words had hurt, yes, but Michael's kindness was healing that pain. The shame that had weighed her down felt lighter, replaced with a warmth she could not fully explain. When she looked at Michael across the table, she saw more than a stranger. She saw a man who had chosen to see her, not her body, not her flaws, but her soul. And in that moment, Clara felt alive, truly alive. For the first time in a long time, she dared to believe that maybe she was not broken. Maybe she was worthy. The cafe was nearly empty now. The staff moved quietly, cleaning tables, preparing to close for the night. Outside, the street lamps glowed, casting soft circles of light on the pavement. Clara looked around, surprised at how quickly the time had passed. Hours ago, she had been sitting alone, drowning in shame. Now she was sitting across from Michael, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Clara smiled faintly, her eyes shining. I can't believe I've been talking so much. I usually keep things inside. Michael leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. His voice was calm but firm. That's because you've never had someone who wanted to hear you. But Clara, your voice matters. Your story matters. Don't hide it anymore. Her throat tightened and her eyes filled with tears again. But these were not the same tears she had cried earlier. These tears carried gratitude, not pain. You don't even know how much this means to me, she whispered. Michael gave her a small smile. I don't need to know every detail to see your worth. I see it in how you speak, in your heart. And you need to see it too. For a long moment, Clara stayed quiet, letting his words settle deep inside her. She thought back to the man who had walked out on her earlier. His rejection had felt like the end of everything. But now, sitting here, she realized it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something stronger. Michael checked the time, then looked back at her. They'll close soon, he said gently. But before we leave, I want you to remember something. Clara nodded, waiting. He looked straight into her eyes, his voice steady and powerful. Never let small minds make you feel small. Do you hear me? You are not too much. You are not too little. You are exactly enough. And if someone cannot see that, it is their loss, not yours. Clara pressed her lips together, her chest rising with emotion. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. It was as if his words had broken the chains she had carried all her life. She whispered, Thank you, Michael. He smiled warmly. Don't thank me. Just promise me one thing. What? She asked softly. Promise me you'll stop apologizing for who you are. Live boldly. Chase your dreams. And never again sit at a table hoping for someone else's approval. You already belong in this world, Clara. Don't let anyone take that away from you. The strength in his words lit something inside her. She felt her back straighten, her shoulders relax, her heart grow steadier. For the first time, she believed she had the right to exist as she was. Not in shame, not in hiding, but in truth. The cafe lights dimmed as the last few customers left. Clara stood slowly and Michael rose with her. As they walked toward the door, she felt a strange mix of sadness and hope. Sadness that the night was ending, but hope because something new had begun inside her. Outside, the cool night air touched her skin. She looked up at the stars, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel small beneath them. She felt part of their light. Michael turned to her. "You'll be okay," he said with certainty. Clara nodded, her voice steady now. "Yes, I will." They shared one last smile before parting ways, each carrying the memory of this night. Michael walked with his usual confident stride, while Clara walked with something new, strength in her steps, a quiet fire in her heart. As she moved down the street, Clara realized something important. She no longer felt like the girl who begged to be accepted. She was no longer defined by rejection. She was a woman who knew her worth. And that, she understood now, was more powerful than any cruel word. The night that began with heartbreak ended with hope. And from that moment on, Clara promised herself one thing. She would never again let anyone tell her she was not enough. Because she finally knew the truth. She was more than enough.